What is going on, everybody? Dominic Caminata here in another beautiful Warrior Wisdom Walk. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited about today's topic. It's going to be for all you sales warriors that are looking for the optimal way to influence your prospects in the direction in which you want them to go. Because ultimately, to be successful in sales, I need to be super dialed in on reprogramming this prospect's belief system. So the question I love asking salespeople is, how many times do you walk up to a prospect's house and their belief system is already in perfect alignment with where I need them to be to earn their business? Wouldn't that be nice if you walk up to the house and they already know exactly how much your product and service is going to cost? They're already 100% willing to invest the money it takes to own your product and service. They're already head over heels sold on you and your company. So obviously that happens on the 5th of February. So I really need to be dialed in terms of how I'm reprogramming their belief system. So when I get to the negotiating table, the prospect understands the value, they see the value, and they're mentally prepared to invest the right amount of money to get the project done by a professional. So I'm trying some new equipment on this Warrior Wisdom Walk, by the way. I got a new gimbal. I got some better audio equipment here. If my voice sounds like it's a little blown out, it's because it is. I just got done doing a 3-day sales training boot camp with a client of mine. And the topic I'm going to be discussing in this Warrior Wisdom Walk is something we definitely talked about at length in this training camp. What I want to talk about on this Warrior Wisdom Walk is essentially how people retain information and how you can be intentional in a sales encounter on how you're getting the homeowner physically and mentally involved. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when I'm trying to deliver the total investment, deliver the price, and earn their business, wouldn't it be nice if the homeowner could actually retain almost all of the information that you share with them in a sales encounter? Have you ever felt that way sometimes, that when you're at the negotiating table, it's like everything you talked about is like in one ear, out the other? And even though you were saying all the right things and you think you're on your A game, you know all the right words to say and stories to tell and all this stuff, you get to the close and the homeowner seemed to have retained very little. And sometimes this will come out in the form of objections, lowball offers, smoke screens for uncertainty, a lot of different things. So ultimately, what can I do to make sure the prospects retain almost all the information that I share with them in a typical sales encounter? Because ultimately, do you want to try earning someone's business when they only remember 5% of the information you share with them? That means you only retain 5% of the value proposition. And of course, it's really hard to earn someone's business if they only see 5% of the value of what it is that you're there to sell. So I want to talk about this. I want you to think that this is like a pyramid. So it starts at the top and kind of works its way down to the bigger slice at the bottom. So think of this as like the pyramid of learning. And in this pyramid of learning, it'll basically break down how people retain information. So I want to start at the very top. So picture at the very top of the pyramid, there's a little slice that says 5%. Your prospects will retain 5% of what they hear, which means when you're in a sales encounter and you're talking, they're only going to retain 5% of what you tell them. This is where a lot of salespeople get in trouble because they dominate the conversation 80% of the time. So the average salesperson talks 80% of the time in a typical sales encounter. So if that's you, the homeowner is only retaining 5% of what you're telling them. So it's obviously not in your favor, right? Because if you're going to try to lay down a big ticket item, lay down a total investment of 20 grand, and the homeowner only sees 5% of the value in that, good luck trying to close them, right? So how can I increase this? Well, homeowners will retain up to 10% of what they read. So if you want to have the homeowner retain twice as much information, go for 5 to 10%. Don't just talk about things. Figure out ways the homeowners can also have words and visuals they can read. So this is where if people have a PowerPoint presentation, and again, it's not like you want them to read like long paragraphs and stuff, but certain like keywords and bullet points, if you can tell them things and have them read it simultaneously, they're going to retain twice as much information. Takes them from 5 to 10%. Now, of course, I don't know about you, but I still wouldn't want to try to close somebody if they retain only 5 or 10% of the information. I think we can do better than that. So homeowners will also retain 20% of what they see in terms of audio visual. So this would be like if you're showing them videos and content in your master presentation. They'll retain up to 20% of what they see in an audio visual format. So if you can include hard-hitting videos in your master presentation and kind of talk them through these videos, make it interactive that way, you're going to go from 5% retention to 20%. So obviously that's a major leap forward, right? Going from 5 to 20%. So figure out ways, instead of me just talking about things, that I can put them in an audio visual format. So that's one thing I was very passionate about with my sales team. We had a lot of hard-hitting videos. They would walk that homeowner through step by step, who we are as a company, our installation process, testimonial videos, all these things to kind of pour fuel on that positive movie in their mind of all the wonderful things that are going to happen once they own our product and once our crews actually show up to start doing the work. So again, 5% of what they hear, 10% of what they read, 20% of what they see in an audio-visual format. How can I really pour jet fuel on this? This is where you start seeing major leaps forward, and this is what separates the amateur salespeople from the best of the best. Your homeowners, your prospects will retain 50% of what they discuss. So now that seems very simple, right? Just having a discussion with somebody. But when you are having a conversation with a prospect and you're talking and they're talking and there's back and forth dialogue, in those interactions, you can essentially 10x the amount of information they retain because now they're engaged in the conversation and a discussion. This is why in the home we say selling is not telling. Anything you say to the prospects, they tend to resist. As a matter of fact, there's data that speaks to that. About 95% of what you tell them, they resist. However, when they're engaged in a conversation and a discussion, now it goes up to 50% retention, 10 times more retention of that information. And it makes the whole thing a lot more interactive. You're getting them mentally involved. And again, when they say it, they own it. So if I truly want to reprogram someone's belief system, I need to get them talking. I need to keep the spotlight on them. So just remember that they'll retain 5% of what you say. However, when they're engaged in a discussion, a back and forth dialogue, that bumps it up to 50%. It's absolutely incredible what a difference that makes. So on your next sales encounter, if you owe anything to yourself after watching this video, figure out a way to make the entire thing a discussion. We're going to be talking through this step by step. I want them talking as much, if not even more than I am. And that's what's going to take the retention of information from 5% to 50%. Now, I want to take it a step further though. What if I can get more than 50% retention? Wouldn't it be nice if I could get close to 100% retention of information? So if you want to have the homeowner retaining 75% of the information, that's by getting them to actually physically do things. So you retain up to 75% of what you do. So instead of just talking about things and having a discussion, what if I can get them physically involved, engage their senses, actually getting them doing things? So getting them involved in the inspection process, getting them involved in the master presentation, putting things in their hands, allowing them to take your product, service, or solution for a test drive. Because that's what's going to, again, pour jet fuel in the positive movie in their mind of the new lifestyle enhancement, how they're going to feel when they own your product. So getting them to actually do things. So you think about it, they're going to retain 5% of what they hear, 10% of what they read, 20% of the audio visual videos and stuff like that, 50% of what they discuss, but 75% of what they do. So obviously the more invested, the more interactive I can get the prospects into the process, the higher the retention of information will be. So that's, again, what separates amateurs from top performers. You know, an amateur will sit there and put the homeowner through a boring lecture for hours on end. A professional will make the whole thing physically and mentally interactive. So engage their senses. And this is something Rick Grosso used to preach to me all the time. Don't just talk about things, get them to experience it. Get them to take ownership of it. And the more I can get them physically involved, the better. Now, the creme de la creme, the pinnacle of reprogramming someone's belief system is not just talking about things, not just having them read things, not showing them a video, not even engaging in discussion, getting the homeowner to teach it back to you. So studies show that human beings retain 90% of what they teach. This is why I'm spoiled rotten at Grosso University, because I teach this stuff all day, every day. We eat, live, breathe, and sleep teaching this stuff. And this is why our retention of this information is at record levels. I can recite this stuff upside down, inside out, forwards and backwards in my sleep, right? That's because we're teaching it all the time. As a matter of fact, if you're a sales warrior watching this video or a sales leader, the quickest way for you to master this content is start teaching it to others. Now, how is this relevant to an in-home sales encounter? One thing I used to be really intentional about in the home is after I get done selling them on anything, let's say I sell them on my company, and we have a major commitment that we always got at the end of our company story. We would say something to the effect of, now that you're an expert on who we are and how we work, I just want to clarify, are there any other questions you have about Grosso University I can answer for you? And usually at this point, they're like, no, you're very thorough. We appreciate everything. And then I would chime in with another trial closing question. I'd be like, can you start to appreciate why thousands of families just like you have entrusted Grosso University for projects like this? They're like, oh yeah, Dominic, I can see that. And I appreciate that, John and Mary. Let me ask you one final question. For me personally, this is most important. If I can design a solution you absolutely fall in love with, and we can exceed your expectations on affordability, will Grosso University have earned the right to ask for your business? Very powerful trial closing question. Let's say they commit to that. They say yes. I get a handshake commitment. I say, that means the world to me. We're going to work really hard for you. You're going to love what I have to show you. But just out of curiosity, John and Mary, now that you do know a little bit more about us, what were some of the things about our company that stood out to you that you appreciated the most? What were some of the elements of how we work that really resonated with you? Now I'm getting them to sell it back to me. And when they're selling it back to you, ladies and gentlemen, they're the ones that are in teaching mode now. They're explaining it to you. And that's how I can get to the maximum retention of information. So one element, again, is just having a conversation about it, having a discussion, getting them involved. The pinnacle of it all is getting the prospect to teach it back to you, getting them selling it back to you. That's how I can get to over 90% retention of the information. So very, very powerful information. So if you want to take your masterful presentation to the next level, it's not just talking about things. It's not even getting into a conversation. It's figuring out a way I can make the whole thing interactive, get them physically and mentally involved into the process, and not just get them to experience it, but get them to teach it to you. And I just wanted to share a story on this subject that kind of hammers this point home. So I was on an appointment with a husband. It was a one-leg scenario, or a one-party appointment, where the wife was at work. And one thing I was always a big fan of is loving the one you're with, investing the time, because often my one legs would turn into two legs after I invested some time, right? So sure enough, 3 hours later, after delivering a master presentation and building a wicked rapport with this guy, the wife shows up and she comes back from work. And the last thing this husband would have wanted to do is have him sit through another, hour-long presentation so we can get his wife up to speed. So what I did, I said, John, since you're an expert now, I tell you what, why don't you go ahead and take the reins on this? Take your wife, Mary, through a master presentation and show her the quality and performance that we're bringing to the table. So the husband proceeded to put his teaching hat on and essentially walk his wife through the masterful presentation. And I was impressed. He was like, obviously not as good as me, but he was pretty dialed in. He was excited, he was enthusiastic, and he's demoing the hell out of my product for me, and he's teaching it. But little did he know, the reason I wanted him to do that is because I wanted him to sear into his subconscious deeply all the content and information that I shared with him over the last, 3 hours. So he's selling himself the whole time. He's in presentation and teaching mode and getting his wife up to speed. And 4.5 hours later, it was like a $50,000 window sale. It was an amazing experience. So just remember, recap, your prospects will retain 5% of what you say, 10% of what they read, 20% of the audio, visual, video content you share, 50% of what they discuss. So if anything else, do yourself a favor, make the sales encounter a conversation, a discussion, back and forth dialogue. That's going to take you a long way. They'll retain 75% of what they do. So get them physically involved, put things in their hands, get them playing with your products and services. When they do it, they're going to retain it. And then the pinnacle of it all is when they teach it to you, when they can sell it back to you. That's what great salespeople are phenomenal at, is asking questions to get the homeowner telling us. And when they say it, they own it. And that's how you can program someone's belief system and effectively influence them in the direction in which you want them to go. So amazing content. I'm very excited about this subject. I could literally talk about this for hours, but this is what's going to turn you in to a top 1% closer. So I appreciate you joining me on this Warrior Wisdom Walk. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, throw a comment, of course, below. We definitely appreciate your feedback. And make sure you go on our YouTube channel. Look at all the content we have. We have hundreds of hours of training content on here. We're going to keep updating this week after week, month after month, to give you all the tools and resources you need to absolutely dominate in the home improvement industry. So I appreciate you walking with me, and on behalf of Grosso University, yes, you are a closer.